Hey guys, I'm Chris Ashley. I'm here with Eric Hayes with Keeping It Native Land Management. Today what we're going to be talking about is what his company has to offer with respect to forest wildlife and habitat management. So stick with us. So guys, I'm here with Eric Hayes, as I said, with Keeping It Native Land Management. So Eric, why don't you talk about a little bit of what your guys' company has to offer and what benefit that might be to some of the viewers.
So what we do is we help a lot of wildlife management oriented folks and even forest management oriented folks that are looking to increase or really expand the value that they have as far as forestry or wildlife on their property. So we're coming in, we're doing grapevine control, marking your boundaries, helping you stay compliant with EQIP programs, which is Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or any of your tax reduction programs. We also help install a lot of warm season grass plantings, pollinator habitat, and even food plots. Generally, when it comes to forestry or wildlife, there's not anything that we aren't willing to do. We've even done some rehabilitation of water drainages that were once scrap yards. So we've helped landowners with that. We've even taken landowners out in the field with us and trained them alongside of us, working to help them be able to do that work on their property.
Yeah, so that's great. You know, one of the things with Eric is, you know, when we kind of met, and we'll go into that here in a little bit, you know, with his background, you know, he's really helped share with me some, not all, of his knowledge and expertise with things like invasive species, you know, consideration for building temporary openings, how to go about doing boundary markings, and some other things that, you know, I can't mention here off the top of my head. But anyways, you know, it's a lot of great things that he individually that I know has to offer. And so why don't you go into a little bit more detail about the fact that it's anything that the person would want to contact you about, right? It's not very rigid or anything fixed or structured that a person would have to do. If they would call you up and just say, hey, I'd like to have my boundaries marked, or maybe I'd like to have temporary openings, or I would just like to learn a little bit more about what to offer with some of this habitat improvement stuff, you guys are able to provide that.
Oh yeah, we've got several landowners that we have spent hours of time with, either via email, texting, helping them identify plants that we've never done a lick of work on their property or earned a single dollar off of them. But at the same time, if someone has a specific job that they need done and it's not through a program, they just want it done, they can give us a call and email. We generally try to get out, we contact back rather quickly, and then we try to get out there as fast as we can. So there's nothing strict or rigid unless it's for some type of program, and then there's generally details that we have to follow as well as the landowner.
Okay. Well, like I said, you know, Eric's been extremely knowledgeable and stuff with the information that he shared with me. So why don't you go ahead and give a little bit of your personal background and experience?
Well, I think like most of us outdoors folk, we all started in the woods, whether it was throwing rocks into the creek or crawling through the creek. That's kind of where I started, was in the creek as a child, and then I started hunting with Dad and Grandpa, and that evolved pretty quickly into that's where I wanted to be. I worked at a Wendy's place while I was in high school, and I decided I don't want to work inside, so how do I work outside? Well, that's how I started going into forestry management at Hocking College. That was what I started my first associates in. And then I ended up starting a second associate's both at Hocking College for wildlife management and forestry management, which then led into getting certification for GIS and GPS, which is an occupational certificate. And then that kind of led me down a path where I had to start getting a job. And so I started working for the Forest Service. I volunteered for the Forest Service to get my internship completed. And then at the end of that internship, they actually offered me a position. So I worked for the Forest Service for about 3 years as a certified forest tech. And then they wanted me longer, so they worked with Ohio State University Extension, and they actually put a 1,400-hour position and basically just gave it to me so I could stay there longer, just gathering research data out of Benton Furnace State Experimental Forest. Then that ended up moving into, I moved on to Division of Natural Areas and Preserves, which is a Ohio Division of Natural Resources. That's one of their sectors. I moved in with them, started working with them as a conservation technician. And then where you got to meet me was the Athens Soil and Water, which I was actually a split employee. So worked half of my season with the ODNR Division of Wildlife, but then I also worked the other half of my season with Athens Soil and Water Conservation District. So this is where I got to do I started out in research, seeing how a lot of this management, got to gather data on how this management affected the area. Then I started getting to help implement it on DNR's land, and then I started getting to help landowners and private, state, and federal implement these types of management practices on their property.
Yeah. Now, as you mentioned, when you and I first met, one of the things too, as I said, it was great with working with Eric and the Soil and Water Group at the time was that, Eric came out, was willing to help teach me, look at the property, understand, it wasn't just a strict, rigid framework of, hey, these are the things that you need to do. It was more of, hey, Chris, what are the things that you would like to do with your property? Are you wanting to make it to where it looks like a beautiful park? Are you wanting to make it be an area that, holds and improves animal quality or habitat for, whether it be hunting deer, turkey, or other kind of wild game? So that was one of the things that I thought was great with meeting with Eric. And then, I was fortunate, and I think your company that you guys have established now, you also work on developing, if a person wants, on either a forest or wildlife habitat management plan. And then that's something like I end up doing, that I went to work with the NRCS as well, or EQIP as well, to get set up with them for some additional funding. So that is something too your business does offer, is that habitat management plans, right?
Yeah, so we prepare forest management plans, wildlife habitat management plans, forest and wildlife habitat management plans. We basically outline your next 10 years of projects for if you want to get into these programs, if you just want to do it yourself, but you still want to know what steps should I take next. We help prepare those for you, walk you through it, take the same walk you and I did when I was with Soil and Water. Now we do the same thing with all of our landowners. We go out, we walk it with them, tell them all of their options, basically tell them what we see, and then let you kind of pick out what you want. And then we put that all into a plan and kind of prepare a step-by-step, year-by-year layout of how to achieve those management goals and objectives.
And then I think, especially too in my case, I think to go and to be able to work together with the NRCS and get set up with EQIP, you're required to have that forest or habitat management plan. And so that's, again, you guys are able to provide one of those steps that's necessary if you wanted to get involved in that type of other group or agency, right?
Correct. And we really encourage folks to work with them. Sometimes it's tough for folks to want to work with those programs. Sometimes it's tough to understand, but if you already want to do these habitat improvements, you might as well look into utilizing these programs, because it's only going to help your dollar go and stretch further when trying to achieve acres and acres of management.
And it's one of those too that, I think you and I probably have talked about it. I know some others that it's not something that you're going to get rich from, but it's something that can maybe help offset some of the costs of things that you're going to be already doing, whether, you're eliminating invasives, you're working on grapevines or multiple rows, all these things. You can maybe qualify for that additional funding, and then, maybe that's paying for some of your seed for food plot blends, or it's helping to do other habitat improvements that you might be doing, offsetting some of the gas that you're using for chainsaws and stuff. So to me, like you said, if it's something, and that's what I looked at, that I'm already going to be doing, that I already want to do, why not go ahead and get that benefit from that available funding? Right.
Yep.
So speaking of some of that, why don't you tell us about some of the agencies that you all partner with or work with as well that they might be interested in?
So a lot of the agencies, there's several folks out there that can help you free of charge. A lot of those tend to be Division of Wildlife. They have private land biologists. You've got Division of Forestry, who have state service foresters. You have NRCS, who have district conservationists and other folks that can come out and lay out engineering plans if you're trying to implement some types of vernal pools, things along those lines. We've worked with pretty much all of those folks, but most importantly, even if you need equipment, some folks really want to drill to put in a lot of their food plots. Yep. There's rentable equipment through most of your soil and water conservation districts. And the best stop for anybody just curious and wanting to get a little more information is to work with your local soil and water conservation district. They're the best first step, and then they get you directed to either the private lands biologist or the state service forester, whoever's going to best fit your needs. So those are the folks that I tend to like to work with. Also, there's folks like us, there's consulting foresters, there's vendors out there like us that help implement this work and can do the very same things. A lot of the times, those tend to come with costs. For now, I don't put it out there too much, but for now, we're on free first-time consults.
Okay.
Then everything after that does cost. So most of your consultants and vendors like us, it's going to take a little bit to get us out there. But most of your soil and water, ODNR, those folks, they're all going to be free of charge. They have pretty busy schedules, but those are the folks that we've worked with, and I worked with all of those folks through my profession as well as even to this point. So definitely look into utilizing those folks.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that. I mean, here just recently for us, being in West Virginia and Wood and Work County, I just recently through, I believe it was the NRCS, rented a tow-behind PTO-driven lime spreader. And very reasonable. Again, kind of like he said, just working with some of the sister agencies, I was able to go up and, you know, it was, I think, a 2-ton lime spreader one time we rented and a 4-ton lime spreader another time. And, you know, don't quote me on it, but it was maybe like $65 a day for the smaller one and $85 a day. Something that's very affordable, reasonable for anyone.
You can't beat the price with what they're renting it at. They're there for their local community, and most of the time anybody renting that is the local community.
Right.
So the pricing's not there to try to make money. It's there to just
Cover their
help
costs,
maintain
I assume.
it.
Yeah,
Yep,
exactly.
just maintain it.
Yep. And they had, I know, a no-till drill that they had there. Also, they had a wiper system to also go through fields to be able to go ahead and treat with herbicide applications, let's say. So that was something that was very beneficial and something that I wasn't necessarily aware of had it not been for working with you on it. So going a little bit further, you know, we're here in Ohio right now, and obviously I've got, through my family, land in West Virginia as well as Ohio. Talk about what areas does your company cover with respect to like region or area or state even with respect to Ohio? Do you also maybe offer or cover work in West Virginia and or any other areas?
So we've had calls from Massachusetts, West Virginia, even Kentucky, a lot through Ohio. We cover about anywhere, and we're willing to go anywhere, but generally there's a cost with it. And that's the big thing, is we always tell everyone that calls that's outside of around the 2.5 hour range that you could probably find someone local, and we try to help them find someone local that may be able to get it done for them cheaper. But if they're struggling, which is tough to find a good vendor these days, if they're struggling and they can't find anyone, we will definitely come to your site and travel. That's not a limitation for us. It's more going to come down to the pocketbook. But overall, right now, currently, we're pretty much about from Athens, southeastern Ohio, around a 2.5 hour travel range from there.
Okay.
We've even been recently asked by NRCS in West Virginia if we wanted to be a vendor, which that's just a hop,
Right.
skip, and a jump
Just
away, of
across the
course.
river.
So we want to help out there, and we're working on expanding throughout the state and getting some satellite hubs throughout the state, and hopefully even soon goals and dreams get a little bit bigger and maybe even go a few states wide.
Mm-hmm. Now, you know, one of the things I definitely recommend, like I said, for me, I really appreciated the time that Eric took to walk the property with me, see, as we put it, my hopes and dreams were for the property, and make suggestions and stuff, and then kind of get a feel for what I was looking at. You know, am I going to be capable of doing the work myself? You know, I can definitely speak firsthand, as Eric, you know, can definitely vouch for me, that doing a lot of the invasive work can be overwhelming. It can definitely take a lot of time, but if you really have that passion and love to be in the outdoors and then see the fruits of your labors, as we see here with his property, that as he's taken me around, it can really be meaningful for you. But again, that's not necessarily for everyone, and that's another great thing that comes with his company is you can go and call them up, get those consultations, and with them, be able to work with them to where maybe they complete that work that you want to be able to establish the property in the way you want it. And maybe you're just limited physically or whatever to where you're just not able to do it yourself. So that's one thing that's great. So with that, if a person goes to reach out to you, a couple of different things I want to ask you is one, what's the best way to go about reaching you all? And two, you know, if someone does want to reach out to you, is there any kind of advance notice that they would need to go out? Is it days, weeks, months, or is it one of those, let's just, you know, you can reach out to them and on the spot there will work and try to figure out what kind of schedule openings you have?
So generally, to start out, how you can find folks like us, so vendors, people to help you achieve your land management goals and objectives. In the state of Ohio, there's a new site which we'll get it on there for them. That way they can have a link to it. But it's through the Nature Conservancy and Ohio Society of American Foresters, I believe is what it is. And essentially, it's an interactive vendors website where you can find local vendors to you, such as myself, that might be local to you. Utilizing that is going to be one of your best tools, but as far as contacting us directly, we can also get some links to you to put in there to be able to contact us. Our website, we've got a website that emails directly to myself and my business partner. We're both tied into that, and that's how we keep our communication. I'd say that's where, if I was to gloat on one thing that we do well, and that's we communicate with our folks, because without communication, you're not going to have much. So we do a lot of really good communicating through our email system, which can be found on the website. Also, we just established a Facebook for the business. We're starting to try to evolve a little, and working on an Instagram as well, but you can look up Keeping It Native, and I'm sure we can attach that link to that Facebook there as well. And a lot of the vendors will have that as well, so you'll be able to really work with those folks and find those folks just with a quick Google, but we're Googleable as well. So that's the best ways to contact us. If not, I'm more than happy to provide my number, business partner's number, and they can contact us directly.
Now, what about, again, like I said, when they reach out, any kind of advance notice, or is it one of those that, just go ahead and call and we'll work out, see what the schedule is, and then go from there?
Yeah, so generally, we like to have anybody call as soon as they figure out they've got a project they want to do, whether it's going to happen next year or this year. Call us now. We'll help you plan it out, because even though it might be a project next year, maybe it's a tree planting, or maybe we need to do some site preparations before then. So maybe we got to get in there this year to do some sprays, and we'll line that up. If it's a general consult, get a hold of us and we will book you at the earliest convenience that we have. And the schedule is pretty flexible. We don't have anything. We're booked up technically through 3 years, but we have schedule flexibility to where there's openings, whether it's weather events or maybe someone backs out because they came to find that was going to be too much to bite off. So there's no really set time frame, other than as soon as you know you want to do something and you think you might want to consider having us out there, get a hold of us and we'll help you with that timeline.
Okay, yeah, that's great. So what I'll end up doing is I'll include all of their contact information in the description below. What I'll do is include any of their social media platforms, some of their direct email or numbers that's wanted to be provided. That way, if you guys have interest, you can go ahead and reach out to them as well, whether it be for the consultation. And you might just find that once you do have that free consultation, that you definitely see that you're interested in trying to improve the habitat on your property. So is there anything else, that you would like to go ahead and share here that I haven't brought up at this time? And I know we've only covered a few high-level topics here, but just anything else that jumps out at you?
As far as No, I don't think there's a whole lot other than, reach out to somebody. If you're looking to do land management, I'd say one of the biggest problems that we've seen is most folks get a hold of us hindsight 2020. And they get a hold of us after they bought the brand new chainsaw, went out and started playing thinking they were going to do hinge cuts, and they implemented all of this work. You're smiling. You think I'm poking at one of your sites, but I swear this is one of the biggest problems that we've come across. And then either A, they finally get a hold of one of those professionals and say, what do you think about this? Or what should I do? And the first thing we can tell you is what you shouldn't have done.
Right.
And so reach out to these professionals, especially the free ones. They're there to help you out. And I always say, get the insight from all of them and pick the information that you like from each of them to help kind of figure out what you want to do, and take what guidance and utilize that on your property, and then use that to start moving forth with your management objectives, because trees tend to take a long time to grow, 60 years before you even start getting close to maturity. And if you're going in and cutting these trees thinking you're going to create the best habitat around, and you might have done a select cut, which is one of the worst ways to harvest your woods, thinking in full intentions that you're improving the habitat for your wildlife, you may have got a short improvement on your habitat, but overall, down the road, you may have degraded it. So 10 years from now, it may not be the type of habitat you want. You may be converted a oak hickory stand completely over to a beech maple forest, which could have all been prevented. You still could have achieved the same habitat, as well as probably generally the same amount of money generated off of that harvest if you would have done it properly. And you could have done it more frequently through the course of time, and when your kids want to do it, or your grandkids. And so I'd say that's kind of the big thing, is reach out to those professionals. whether it's us, whether it's a vendor, whether it's a consultant forester, definitely your professionals that are free out there, reach out to them, get that info, and then move forward with your objectives and your goals.
Yeah, and to me, it's one of those things, whether it's through work or through this habitat stuff, you know, one of the things I like to hear and say myself is you don't know what you don't know. And so that's one of the great things, you know, when I started working with Eric, and then of course now he's expanded here with co-owner of this new company, is that, you know, when he comes in and you start learning about these different things, immediately when you started talking, one of the things that jumps out in my mind is, and we've talked about it here with your property, is where do you start? And, you know, I even mentioned to him earlier that when I was doing my invasive work, I try to tell myself it's kind of like, I think it's a generic, I think it's a generic saying, or at least that's what I use, is to me, it's like, how do you eat a whale? And, you know, the answer I always say is one bite at a time. And that's kind of the way I look at doing this invasive work. As an example is the autumn olive, the tree of heaven. It can be overwhelming, and you just got to tell yourself, I'm just doing it one bite at a time. I don't have to do it all today. I don't have to do it all tomorrow, but I need to make sure I'm doing it correctly and in the right sequence. So one of the things,
if not, you're going to be doing it again,
well,
and probably a lot more.
Right, and that's one thing that jumped out at me, is that someone might, as you mentioned just a second ago, say, hey, I want to go in and create bedding areas, and I'm going to do all this hinge cutting, and it's going to be awesome. But if they didn't go in, especially if they have the issues, to go in and address invasives, that before they let all that light in from all that hinge cutting, and yeah, they want regeneration and they want growth and they want it thickening, what they might end up getting is it all choked out and be just for naught by not dealing with the invasives ahead of time. So again, don't get the cart ahead of the horse.
I like how you brought that up too, because I don't know if you remember, but the way I always put it to my landowners is don't try to shove the whole cookie down your throat. Take a bite at a time, and if that bite wasn't big enough, take a bigger bite.
Yeah.
Don't overwhelm yourself. Keep it fun. That's one of the hardest parts, is to ultimately keep the work fun, because if it's fun, you're going to want to come back and do it again. And so, you know, getting into programs or wanting to do any of those management, make sure you start small. You can aim big, but start small and work your way to it. And like you said, one step at a time. Before you know it, you'll have 50 acres done. You're like, wow, that was quick.
Yeah, and you look back on it and you realize, you know, as I said, you look back at what you've done with your property and how it's changed, and, you know, you just get that sense of, not I won't say approval, but just gratification of how much work you've put into it. It gets you back out there. For me, it's one of the things that I do with my kids and family, that, you know, I'm able to get them out in the outdoors. It's taught me things to where I'm actually riding around with friends on their property and pointing out, that's autumn olive, that's tree of heaven. You know, you need to hack and squirt, you need to cut stump, you need to foliar spray, here's when you need to do it. You know, so I've learned a ton of new information from this that's just been great. So, guys, from this here, I just want to go ahead and say, you know, thanks for joining us. You know, I appreciate Eric joining us here and sharing some of the information with his company. I want to make sure and remind you guys to check out the information to be able to contact them in the description below. And I hope that you guys found this video useful. If you did, like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring that bell. I'll be bringing you more content. And also, too, make sure you guys reach out to Eric and his group. And I think you guys will find it to be very beneficial. So again, we'll see you on the next video.
And keep it native.
That's right.